What is up, guys? It's Alex here, back for another video, and in this video I want to make a town tier list. Now, I want to do a quick announcement before I get into this video. So in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to start coming out with different type of content on this YouTube channel. I'm going to start making videos that have to do with self-development and psychology and things like that. It's the kind of content that I wanted to make for a while, and now I actually have an opportunity to do that. So it's just kind of precaution for you guys. Don't freak out when you see that come out. If you're here just for the Heroes 3 content, you can go ahead and skip the psychological stuff. I will still continue to make Heroes 3 videos. It's just that, between streaming and making Heroes 3 videos and developing this YouTube channel, I didn't really feel like, I have enough time to make a whole another YouTube channel for the psychological stuff. So I want to try to do this on the same channel for now and maybe split it in the future. So don't freak out when you see those videos come out. And if you are interested in that, then be on the lookout for those. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, let's get into this video. So this video, I wanted to make the town tier list because I've gotten a lot of these questions on my streams, and also I've seen these questions in the Facebook groups as well. A lot of people are asking, like, how would you rank the towns? What are the strengths and weaknesses and things like that? So I decided to go ahead and make a video to kind of explain all of that. Now, a little disclaimer before I get into this. First of all, mainly this is going to be based on PvP and Jebus Cross, which is the template that I play the most. So, for other templates, the rankings may be a little bit different depending on the peculiarities of the template itself. So yeah, just keep in mind that it is mostly based on Jebus Cross. And also, it certainly is my own subjective opinion, so in some of these cases, there could be towns that you might like more or something like that. So still keep in mind that, there is some subjectivity to this. I do think that a lot of, players who have played this game in PvP for a while will probably agree with me. However, there may still be some disagreement. Keep in mind, like, please don't hate me if I rank your town lower than you think, or your favorite town lower than you think it should be. All right. So let's get into this. Top tier town, the OP town is certainly Necro, right? And of course, the reason that Necro is strong is essentially Necromancy and Animate Dead. Even though Necromancy has been nerfed in Horn of the Abyss, it is still really, really strong. And Animate Dead, of course, is really strong because you don't even need Earth Magic to actually be able to keep your skeletons or your undead units after the battle. So it doesn't work like Resurrect, where you have to actually have advanced Earth Magic to keep your units. With Animate, you're basically really, really strong. So what that means is that in most cases, Necro doesn't really need a good biome. Necro can just Necro skeletons and take side villages and, take prisons and things like that, convert as many things as possible into skeletons, and in most cases on JC, break on 1-2-1 with full moves with Animate and somewhere around 300 to 400 skeletons. And, Necro can also take Utopias that way. Obviously, also Vampire Lords are pretty OP, and they can clear a lot of stuff just by themselves. And, another good thing is that Necromancers and Death Knights have a high chance of rolling Earth Magic, right? Other than that, Necro is not that great of a town at all. As far as the creatures go, they're some of the weakest. Like Tier 7, the Bone Dragon and the Ghost Dragon is basically the weakest Tier 7 creature. Maybe, I think the Phoenixes and the Firebirds are still a little bit stronger. Dread Knights are really good, but you don't usually go for Dread Knights, and everything else, like Walking Dead are super slow. The Whites can be okay. But they're not that strong. Vampire Lords are good, Liches are pretty good, but really, you're most of the time just going for the skeleton snowball and, trying to necro up as many skeletons as possible and get animate as soon as possible and basically do as much as possible with that. And usually that means that you can actually win because you'll be able to farm more than your opponent faster. And basically what you're paying for when you're paying for Necro in a trade is you're paying for stability, because like I said before, Necro doesn't need an amazing biome to actually be able to win or have a good game or to break on 1-2-1, you know, whereas other towns kind of do in most cases. All right, so the second town, which is close to Necro, but certainly under Necro, so I don't put these two on the same level. I do put Conflux a little bit below Necro. So Conflux is also OP in a lot of cases, but what makes it OP is Luna, right? So Luna is, basically, a hero that breaks the game. If you guys saw my hero tier list, then yeah, I certainly have Luna at the top, and I think a lot of people agree. You know, when you get Luna as any town, she can just be so much help because she can clear so much of the map and farm so much with no army, basically, you know, just using her firewall. So that's basically what makes Conflux OP. If you're not playing Luna, it's not that special. You know, you can play Grindin or you can play Lebetha, who start with Earth Magic, and you can get Expert Earth really quickly, and that's also pretty good, but Luna is really what makes it OP. So, you know, if you're not playing Luna as Conflux on Jebus Cross, you know, I think you're not doing something right, you know. You could be doing better with Luna. But the reason that I have Conflux lower than Necro is, of course, because there are situations where Luna can get countered, right? She, you know, cannot deal with fire-resistant breaks or super fast breaks, without some really good army and really good magic like Resurrect or something like that, you know. So, or ranged guards can be difficult with her. You can go for Mass Forgetfulness, but I mean, something like Power Liches or Titans, for example, they're immune to Forgetfulness. So, in those cases, you know, Luna can certainly struggle. But in most other cases, Luna and Conflux is kind of OP. And another thing that's always good for Conflux is certainly that you have the Magic University, so you don't have to actually worry about rolling Earth Magic or, you know, whatever magic you need. You can always buy that. And obviously, you also have magic elementals who are fire or magic resistant. You have fire elementals that you can go for Armageddon strategies with. You also have the Firebirds who are super fast and generally are going to give you top speed in combat, which is also super important. But other than that, their creatures are nothing special, and most other heroes are not that special either. I mean, you know, Grind and Lebetha are nice. A couple of might heroes like Monair can be decent too, but I mean, Luna is really what makes this the, you know, second tier town. All right, and next we're going to get into the other towns that are not necessarily so OP. Well, this one kind of still is, and that's Dungeon, right? So Dungeon is third in my book. And I would say Dungeon is probably the most well-rounded town. It has the most things going for it when, you know, you just kind of list everything down on paper, right? It doesn't have too many weaknesses. Basically, the only weakness that Dungeon has is the terrain. The terrain is, you know, you don't get a plus speed advantage, right? Like in most other, you start on dirt, same as Necro, but Necro is what gets the speed advantage there. Dungeon's terrain is underground, and on Jebus Cross, you don't have underground terrain. So, for that reason, you have to upgrade troglodytes on day one, for example. Then, you know, without upgraded troglodytes, you cannot do crypts, you cannot do churchyards without losses and things like that. And a lot of other fights are just a lot easier with upgraded troglodytes. But other than that, you have the Portal of Summoning, which is amazing. If you can take a Dragon Cave day 1 or 2, that's a second dragon right there. You have the Mana Vortex, which is also amazing. Double mana, great. You have a lot of good heroes with a high chance of rolling Earth Magic. You have, the Resurrection Specialists, Jadit and Alamar. You've got the Logistics Specialist, Gunner. Shakti is pretty decent as well. And, just in general, a lot of decent heroes, even like like somebody like Dace, you know, when you're playing, you know, even Castle or Rampart, and you get a dungeon hero, you know, even like Dace, a lot of times you might be thinking about maining him because they'll have a good chance of rolling Earth Magic, and they are likely going to have good skills like tactics and offense and things. So, yeah, for that reason, you know, I'm ranking Dungeon as third. You know, Troglodytes are also really good in the early game. You can also, you know, if you can get to the Black Dragons, those are magic resistant and great. And Dungeon can also roll Armageddon, so you can always go for, you know, Black Dragon Armageddon memes. And yeah, so essentially those are the reasons that I have Dungeon at number 3. And actually, guys, if you want some additional information on some of these towns, I do have more detailed overviews and also playthroughs for some of them. I think I have Necro, Conflux, Dungeon, and Tower. I haven't done all of them yet. I will do them in the future. You know, here I'm just kind of doing a basic overview and basic, you know, explanation of their strengths and weaknesses. But in those videos, I go into more detail. So if you're interested in that, check those out. I'll have a link in the description below. Okay, so next is kind of the mid-tier, and I actually have 4 towns in this kind of same spot. I do rank some of these higher than others, but I would say that a lot of these are really kind of a toss-up, you know. It's more your personal preference. So these towns are Castle, and the rank is going to be in this order. So I rank Castle at the top of these. Second, I rank Tower. Then I rank Fortress, and then Rampart. Right, so all of these towns are mid-tier. And really, you know, in a lot of these cases, like when you're trading in one of these pairs, a lot of the time, you know, you could actually be trading for a town that's, you know, the opposite of the town that your opponent's trading for. Like, I had a game where, you know, it was like Tower versus Fortress, and I was trading for Tower, and, you know, I ended up selling it to my opponent, and he actually picks Fortress. So I actually got the best of 2 worlds. I even had a game where it was, I think it was Tower versus Dungeon, and I sold it to my opponent, and he actually picked Tower. So I actually got to play Dungeon as plus gold. So a lot of this does depend on your personal preference and kind of, you know, what you're comfortable playing as, and that even goes for the top tier towns as well. Like, before I knew how to play Necro well, or before I knew how to use Luna, it made no sense. Excuse me. It made no sense to actually pay like 7k gold to start as Necro or Conflux, right? But once you know how to use them, they become really, really strong, you know, once you know what you're doing. So then it makes sense to pay that. But if you are not that comfortable, you know, you would likely sell it cheaper, so you are not stuck, you know, playing something with less gold and something that you don't really know how to play that well. So again, yeah, like, but I would say that this applies to these towns more so than any others. These mid-tier towns, you would probably pay more for the town that you're comfortable with, right? But the reasons that I rank them like this. So Castle can be really strong because of the synergy of Portal of Glory, Building Angels in Town, and Conses, right? And you can always, like, Castle is probably the town that goes for the Archangel upgrade more often than any other town goes for the tier 7 upgrade creatures. It does cost a lot of gold, of course. However, for Castle, a lot of times it makes sense. Like, if you have Utopias in your biome or something like that, you can go for it, and you have a few Portals of Glory. You can have some something like 10 Angels on 1/2/1, then farm Utopias and build Archangels, and then break 1/2/2 or 1/2/3 with something like 10 or, you know, 13 Archangels, which, you know, it will be pretty much unbeatable if you get like anti-magic on them right off the bat. That has happened to me, actually. I was playing Conflux, and I remember I think I broke something like 1/17 or 1/2/1 with like 11 angels, and I was super happy because I had a lot of conses, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm really strong. And then Castle comes on 1/2/3 with like 13 archangels and just opens with anti-magic, and I can't do anything with that against that. So yeah, basically, you know, Castle for that reason can be quite strong. However, Castle can certainly struggle if you don't get any Portals of Glory, or at least any Cavalier dwellings. Because as Castle, you're usually starting with Valeska, right? You're starting with archers. And if you don't, they are not going to make it easy to take any creature banks. You can't really take conses with them. You can't really take hives with them. You can't really take experimental shops or pickets with them, right? So unless you find Portals of Glory or champions, or you find some boxes of units that allow you to take some other creature banks, and you can start snowballing that, you can be in trouble. Like, Castle that doesn't see any pogs, Portals of Glory is usually not that happy, right? So there are certainly cases where Castle, can get screwed over, but generally it will still be pretty strong. Generally, you will be able to find those dwellings, and you will be able to snowball those dwellings into other creature banks, and then just keep snowballing that. So for that reason, I have, and obviously also Castle doesn't have any terrain penalties. So all of these towns so far have not had terrain penalty, and now we're actually getting into ones that do. So next I have Tower. So Tower is, it used to be really bad. It used to be bottom tier next to like Inferno and Cove. Now Tower is much better because there are lamps. That's basically what makes Tower good. However, because of that, it's kind of hit and miss. Sometimes you can get maps where there are no lamps. And when there are no lamps, you're very limited. Because you're usually depending on gremlins, the upgraded gremlins, as your power stack. But the thing about gremlins is they're really squishy in melee. So you cannot take hives with them. You cannot take pickets with them. You cannot take experimental shops, really. Or conses, right? So really what you're depending on with Tower is going for obviously lamps, right? And then snowballing genies, and then with the genies you can start farming conses or pickets, maybe experimental shops, maybe even hives. If you don't get that, well, there is another option of starting with Josephine, where you can start, you can get a decent golem stack and you can snowball hives. However, you do have to deal with that terrain penalty. So you really don't want to drag Cyclops or Angels or Wyvern through the snow, if you can help it. So really, the only other viable option besides lamps is to go for dwellings, right? If you can find a giant dwelling early on, it is viable to take it with just your gremlins and nothing else. And then with that, you can start snowballing and, start taking hives, or maybe other objects. But again, what happens when you don't get them, right? And, another thing that is good about them is... with Tower, you do have the library, which gets you additional spells, and giants are really easy to build. They're the cheapest. They only cost 5k gold. The giant dwelling only costs 5k gold. And so you can generally build them on week 1 without too much issue if you get a couple of cloud temples. So you can generally get a decent giant stack. And you do have some decent heroes like Solmir with his Chain Lightning specialty. You have Neela, who's an armor specialist. You have a few scholars. Thane, who is a genie specialist, which, is really good for genies because it gives them speed 13 on snow, which actually gives you first speed and hive. So you can do something like mass slow if you have it. And actually, I actually forgot to mention about Castle. One of the reasons that it's not really as strong as it could be is because there are no really good heroes for Castle. They have a low chance of rolling earth magic, and in general, they're just not that great. Alright, so yeah, I think we're done talking about Tower. Basically, lamps are what makes it good. Genie buffs are really good. The other day I was able to break 115 with full moves because I was able to farm a lot of genies. But when you don't get any lamps, it's not that great. Okay, next we have Fortress. So with Fortress, obviously the glaring disadvantage is the terrain, right? You have the swamp, which means that you really don't want to carry cyclopes or giants or angels through the swamp if you can help it, unless you have wings or wayfarer's boots, because it's the worst terrain penalty in the game. It's 75%, right? Snow is only 50%. But yeah, swamp is 75%. However, it can still be quite good if you get a decent number of hives. So generally the strategy for Fortress is to go for hives. You know, find hives, go for hives, because you can carry Wyvern through the swamp without any terrain penalty. And with them, you know, you can always upgrade your Wyvern to get Wyvern Monarchs, which is really good. You know, makes them a lot faster and gives them that poison ability. And you have a lot of decent heroes, and Beastmasters in general get a lot of defense, which makes you really tanky. And it's good to take hives. You can take a size 3 hive on day 1 with Fortress. You know, and you have heroes like Tazar, for example, who, you know, is an armor specialist. You have, you know, just in general, most Beastmasters have armor, and they get a lot of defense as they level up. You also have Andra, who is an intelligence specialist. So, in general, it's quite good, unless you don't get hives. If you don't get hives, it can be difficult. Like, even if you get, let's say, a lot of conses, but they're far away off-road in the swamp, that's not going to be good, because you're going to just spend a lot of time trying to chain those out of the swamp because of the terrain penalty. So really, you know, again, kind of hit and miss like Tower. You know, if you get hives, it's good. If you don't, it's not so good. So that's kind of why I have Fortress here. They're decent, and another disadvantage that they do have is their Mage Guild only reaches level 3, so you cannot go above level 3. You can't get any good spells, the tier 4 or 5 spells, and their creatures are also nothing special, really. Even their Hydras are pretty slow. They do have the nice no retaliation ability, but in general, you know, something like Angels or even Giants is better than having Hydras. Okay, so the next town is Rampart, and you know, some people can certainly disagree with me here, you know, because Rampart, over these two towns, what it does have is that there is no terrain penalty. But the problem with Rampart is it's a little bit limited in terms of its options, right? A lot of these other towns, like Fortress, can go for conses. It can also go for pickets once you start snowballing some hives. You can go for, obviously, experimental shops as well. Tower can, you know, once you start snowballing some genies. Castle can when you start snowballing some angels. With Rampart, you basically can only go for pickets and in the early game until you start snowballing something. The strength is that you do have the Grand Elves. Those are good. But unless you find another box of them or something, you're really not going to have that many. And, you know, you can start taking pickets, but those can be risky. You know, if you don't have an anti-morale artifact, they can always morale on you and, you know, get in the face of your Grand Elves, and then you're just dead. You cannot go for conses, you cannot go for hives unless you have some other creature banks, and, you know, experimental shops, same thing, right? So in a lot of cases, you're either looking for pickets, or you're looking for other, you know, creature dwellings, like dragon dwelling or unicorn dwellings, or even some additional dwarf dwellings in your biome. So with a good number of dwarves, you can actually go into hives, right? So I would say, yeah, Rampart is slightly limited, and it's definitely a bit lower on the list since it's since logistics was nerfed, because it does have the logistics specialist Kier, who used to be a good hero, you know, that everybody would start with. Now everybody starts with Ivor for the additional elves, and, you know, and it doesn't seem that great. So, I mean, I'm sure people would disagree with me here, but I would say that Rampart is at the bottom of the mid-tier towns. I would rather certainly have any of these three than Rampart. Okay, and the next tier, next to the bottom, is Stronghold. People dislike Stronghold, and I can't necessarily say that I'm a huge fan of Stronghold, but I still think that it's better than the last two towns. First of all, it does have a terrain penalty, but it's not that bad. Oh yeah, and also I forgot to mention about Rampart. The heroes usually are nothing too special. There are two decent ones. There is Kier, who's a logistics specialist, and Mephala, who's an armor specialist. Those are good. However, in a lot of cases, you have trouble rolling earth magic, and you actually cannot get fire magic as rangers, so you can't go for like Armageddon or something like that, or you can, but it's a little bit more difficult. Or like Mass Berserk or something like that is usually not going to be an option. Okay, so back to Stronghold. In Stronghold, you do have some good heroes. You have Craig Hack, who's an offense specialist. You have Dessa, who is a logistics specialist. Also Gundula, another offense specialist. Tyrixor, who people usually start with, is pretty decent himself. And in general, they get a lot of attack. The terrain is not that bad. It's only 25% penalty, so it's the least penalty out of all the terrain. So it's, you feel it, but it's not that bad. The problem with Stronghold is that their units are really squishy. So what that means is that when you do fights, they hit really hard, but they cannot tank damage worth of crap. So basically what it means is that you got to kill your opponent. You got to be intelligent about taking retaliation and killing your opponent or whatever you're fighting in one hit without actually taking any hits from them. And that goes double for offense specialists also, because they generally don't get a lot of defense. Like Craig Hack doesn't get a lot of defense as he levels up. So that's kind of the motto of barbarians, hit first, hit hard, and, try to kill your opponent before they get a chance to actually hit you. Because if they do hit you, they will do a lot of damage. The units, even the behemoths, are not that tanky. The regular ones, definitely fall pretty quickly. The ancient behemoths are pretty good, and they do ignore the opponent's defense, 80% of it. Cyclopes are also good, obviously with pickets and cyclope dwellings, but you're also pretty limited in terms of going for objects. You can take pickets. In some cases, you can take conses if you have enough wolf raiders, but you cannot go for hives, and you can't really go for, hives and experimental shops are slightly difficult. So what that would mean is that you are also in a lot of cases looking for creature dwellings like behemoths or cyclopes or even like ogres or something like that to give you something that can tank in a hive if you want to start farming hives, or even pickets and things like that. So you are slightly limited. You're also limited by the fact that as Fortress, Stronghold can only get level 3 Mage Guild, so that is another thing that is limiting. And another good thing about Stronghold is you do have those artifacts laying around in the corpses and the wagons and stuff, so a lot of times you can get some decent stats and some decent artifacts just for free, basically, which is good. And you do have that magic fountain that doubles your mana, and it actually has 2 slots to double mana, so you can get 2 double manas each week, basically, on it, so that's also really good. But overall, it's certainly kind of close to the bottom tier town. Alright, and next you have the last 2 towns, Cove and Inferno, and I put them on a bottom tier and in that order. So I rank Cove slightly higher, I would say, than Inferno, and I'm going to explain why. So basically, Cove is kind of like Fortress, but worse, because Cove also has the swamp terrain penalty. However, the problem with Cove is that you can't really go for hives. With Fortress, you can go for hives and you can upgrade the Wyvern. Cove usually can't really do hives unless you get some creature dwellings first, because you generally start as Cassiopeia, who gets a nymph power stack, and nymphs are no good in hives because the dragonflies will outspeed them and they will just kill the nymph power stack before they can do anything. And you can start with Derek, but even then, as Derek can only do a size 2 hive on day 1, as opposed to Fortress being, Fortress and Dungeon and Necro being able to do a size 3 hive, even Tower with Josephine, a size 3 hive on day 1. Yeah, Cove will only be able to do a size 2, and, so it's kind of difficult to snowball that. Generally, you do start as Cassiopeia, and Cassiopeia can go for pickets. So she is good at taking pickets. It is risky because if the dogs get morale, if the wolf raiders get morale, you can basically die. So without anti-morale artifacts, it is tricky, but she can do it with no losses, assuming they get no morales or you have an anti-morale artifact. But the problem with that, obviously, is if you have them off-road, you have to drag Cyclopes through the swamp, right? And you can also go for Conses with a large enough stack of Oceanids. But again, same thing, you have to drag them through the swamp. So for that reason, it's certainly worse than Fortress, because Fortress can at least take hives pretty easily and snowball the Wyvern. For Cove, it's not as easy, and what you generally want to do is also find some dwellings, like Nyx dwellings or the Sea Serpent dwellings, and then take that into hives, for example. You do have some decent heroes. Cassiopeia is a decent start. Eovacius is a really good hero. Corcus is offense specialist. So there are some good heroes, and they have a decent chance of rolling Earth Magic. But still, that doesn't really make up for the swamp terrain and inability to do hives early. So that is why Cove is over here, next to last. And last but not least, or last but least, last and least, is Inferno. Now, Inferno is actually not that bad of a town. When you look at it on paper, some of these towns are a bit worse. Like Inferno can roll Armageddon. You have the Freed, who are fire resistant. Devils are pretty good. Magogs are pretty good as a start. However, when it comes to Jebus Cross, they are quite limited and quite slow. You can go for example, for demon farming, but demon farming is really slow. You basically start demon farming on day 5 in general. Maybe day 4 if you skip the Gogs upgrade. So for that reason, Inferno is not that great. Inferno is really dependent on creature dwellings in most cases. You can't really take hives. You can't really take pickets. You can't really take experimental shops or conses, Maybe with a large enough Gog stack for small pickets you can, because they do have speed 8 on Kolth, but it's still going to be tricky. They don't do a whole lot of damage, it's not going to be that easy. So your best bet with Inferno is generally to find an Efreet dwelling or a Devil dwelling and take that early, and then snowball that into hives, pickets, conses, whatever else you can farm. So, but again, if you don't find any of those dwellings, you're kind of screwed. Your options are going to be pretty limited, and I would say more limited than something like Castle even, because Castle can at least build angels. Well, Inferno, I guess, can build devils, but, it's not necessarily going to help you quite as much. And as far as heroes go for Inferno, they're pretty trash. There's not really anybody good. Not a great chance of rolling Earth Magic. No good specialist. The best thing you have is Aiden, who is an intelligence specialist. Other than that, you don't really have any logistics specialist or offense or anything like that. So nothing special in terms of heroes. Kind of limited in terms of taking creature banks. And as far as their creatures go, they're mostly like devils are good, and Magogs are good, and Efreet are good. Well, Magogs are okay, and Efreet are good, I would say. Other than that, Imps are super trash. They're just really, really weak. They're melee creatures that basically are as weak as gremlins. And, then like demons and dogs and pit fiends are not that great. So for that reason, essentially Inferno is here at the bottom of the list. Okay, guys, so that's about it for my town tier list. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Again, a lot of this is my opinion, and a lot of this is based on Jebus Cross, but I hope it gives you a little bit of an idea of the strengths and weaknesses. Again, if you want to hear, the overviews in more detail, check out the videos in the description below. And as always, if you guys want to see more Heroes 3 content, check out my Twitch stream. I'll also have the link in the description below. And that's it, guys. So thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for more videos. Peace out.